If anything happens to me, tell Romy everything. That's what Rob Reiner allegedly said in a voicemail discovered just hours after his death. But who was he warning? And what, exactly, did he know was coming? In Hollywood, secrets are currency. But sometimes, those secrets aren't about roles or box office deals. Sometimes, they're about bodies. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And this time, the secret came dressed in blood. Rob Reiner, a man whose name you probably recognize from movies like The Princess Bride, A Few Good Men, and Stand By Me. A man who once sat at the pinnacle of American storytelling. Now the center of a real-life murder investigation, one that's unraveling a mystery far darker than any movie he ever directed. Because on Sunday, December 14th, Rob and his wife Michelle were found dead, brutally stabbed, in their multi-million-dollar Brentwood estate, by their own daughter. And just hours later, their son, Nick Reiner, was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. But here's where it gets chilling. That same night, federal agents found something buried deep inside Rob's office. Legal documents, account statements, encrypted USB drives, and 3 words scrawled in a margin that turned the entire investigation on its head. Cayman, Switzerland, Montenegro. That's right. According to multiple law enforcement sources, Rob Reiner, Hollywood royalty, political activist, cultural icon, had been quietly moving money offshore for years. No one saw it coming. Not his friends, not his fans, not even his own family. Or did they? That's the question at the center of this story. Because what the FBI found inside that Brentwood mansion went far beyond money. It hinted at a plan, an escape, a betrayal, and possibly a murder that was never supposed to happen. Let's pull the curtain back. This video isn't just about a crime. It's about a puzzle. Each piece, financial, emotional, psychological, tells a story. And when you line them up, you're left with a chilling portrait of a family collapsing from within. But before we dive into the hidden properties, secret trusts, and final voicemails, let's pause and ask, who was Rob Reiner in his final days? And why was he, a man who built a career on truth, justice, and storytelling, suddenly surrounded by lies, deception, and ultimately death? December 14th, the day Hollywood cried. At exactly 11:06 p.m., the Los Angeles Police Department received a frantic call. A young woman, breathing heavy, sobbing. "It's my parents. They're not moving. There's blood, so much blood." That voice was Romy Reiner, the 27-year-old daughter of Rob and Michelle, a comic artist, a digital creative, a woman who, just hours earlier, had reportedly shared dinner with her parents. Within 12 minutes, officers arrived at the scene. Brentwood, a quiet, upscale neighborhood known for manicured lawns and gated mansions, not for double homicide crime scenes. Inside, Rob and Michelle lay in the living room. Multiple stab wounds, signs of a struggle, no forced entry. But one detail stood out. The house alarm had been disabled from inside the home. And according to officers, Nick Reiner, their son, was found sitting in the guest house. Calm, distant, silent. The arrest no one expected, or was it? Nick Reiner, age 32, a screenwriter, a recovering addict, a man who, despite a famous last name, had largely lived in his father's shadow. He was arrested without incident. No chase, no resistance, just silence. According to leaked reports, he allegedly muttered one sentence as officers cuffed him. "I told them not to open that file." But what file? Was it a metaphor? A confession? Or something more literal? We'll get there. Because the file Nick may have been talking about was very real and very dangerous. The mansion becomes a crime scene. The Reiner's home, valued at $13.5 million, was sealed off. FBI agents joined the LAPD within 24 hours. Why? Because during their sweep of the house, something triggered federal jurisdiction. A fireproof safe hidden behind a false panel in Rob's office. Inside, bank documents, digital drives, passports, deeds, and a small, handwritten notebook titled Plan Omega. Let that sink in. Plan Omega, a name that doesn't exactly scream casual paperwork. What was in that plan? Why did Rob have fake identification? And what were all these references to foreign countries, offshore accounts, and multi-million-dollar transfers? This wasn't just a financial portfolio. It was an escape manual. A family with fractures. Now let's zoom out. From the outside, the Reiners looked like a power couple. Rob, the award-winning filmmaker. Michelle, a renowned photographer and activist. Two adult children, each chasing creative careers. But behind the scenes, there were cracks. Sources close to the family describe escalating tension between Rob and Nick. Allegations of verbal fights. Conflicting accounts about money, inheritance, and trust funds. Nick reportedly resented being cut off financially. Rob had begun shifting assets into offshore holdings. And Michelle? She was seen as the bridge between them, until she wasn't. Romy, meanwhile, was described as the quiet one. But when police asked if anyone might have a motive, she allegedly answered, "There's someone in this family who's dangerous. And he always said he'd do it if they tried to expose him." Was she talking about Nick? Or someone else? Because here's the kicker. The FBI didn't just find one set of fingerprints on the safe. They found two. And one of them wasn't Nick's. Hollywood's hidden side. We need to ask the uncomfortable question. Why would Rob Reiner, a man known for liberal activism, anti-corruption campaigns, and political transparency, be hiding money offshore? The documents found in his home weren't loose receipts. They were deliberate. Registered shell companies. Encrypted bank statements. Real estate under pseudonyms. Properties in Cayman Islands, Zurich, and Montenegro, all purchased within the last 6 years. Some were even linked to email accounts bearing Michelle's maiden name. If this was simply about tax evasion, it was an elaborate one. But what if it wasn't about taxes? What if it was about running? So why run? That's what investigators are now piecing together. Because alongside the documents, there was something else. A single envelope. Sealed. Tucked inside Rob's desk drawer. Unmarked, except for one word, scribbled in red ink. Romy. Inside. A letter. Not a will. Not a confession. Just a cryptic note. If you find this, I'm already gone. Don't trust the one who wants to stay. Who was Rob warning her about? Nick? Michelle? Someone else? The story starts here. This isn't the conclusion. This is the beginning. Because over the next chapters, we're going to dive into the mysterious Plan Omega, the Montenegro villa no one knew Rob owned, the secret Michelle was hiding from both her children, and the one clue in Nick's possession that might exonerate him entirely or seal his fate forever. So buckle in. Because what comes next isn't just shocking. It's devastating. And no one, not even Hollywood's most powerful, could have predicted what was hiding behind those walls. What was Rob Reiner so afraid of? Was it blackmail? Was someone threatening his family? Or was this a man trying to bury his own sins before they swallowed him whole? That envelope marked Romy wasn't just a warning. It was a message, and every word in that message pointed toward one terrifying possibility. Rob Reiner knew he was going to die. Let that sink in. Because the note wasn't written in a moment of panic. It wasn't scribbled out during an argument. It was printed, carefully worded, sealed, and dated 2 weeks before the murders. Now ask yourself, who writes a letter like that unless they've already seen what's coming? The Rob Reiner you didn't know. You know the public version of him. The Hollywood icon. The political voice. The director behind some of the most quotable lines in movie history. But behind the camera, behind the Twitter posts and red carpet photos, there was a man fighting demons. And this wasn't a recent development. Close friends, speaking anonymously, described a Rob Reiner who had grown increasingly paranoid in recent years. Not about stalkers, not about fans, but about people close to him. There were whispers, one insider revealed, that he was hiding something big, that he was scared. Not for his career, but for his family. He stopped doing interviews. He turned down major directing offers. He stopped traveling altogether, unless it was to Zurich or the Caymans or Montenegro. That's not coincidence. That's pattern. That's fear. Plan Omega, what was it? Let's talk about the safe. Inside it, the FBI found something labeled Plan Omega, a term that's never been mentioned in any of Rob's public work, books, or notes. But buried within that file was a step-by-step breakdown. Multiple passports under fake identities, access codes to offshore accounts, legal documents showing planned wire transfers totaling over $37 million, real estate contracts for properties in 3 different countries, all under anonymous shell corporations. And the most chilling part? A one-way plane ticket to Tivat, Montenegro, dated December 15th, the day after the murders. This wasn't paranoia. This was a full-fledged exit strategy. So now we ask, was Rob planning to run from something? Or someone? Who helped him? Nobody pulls off a scheme like this alone. You don't create offshore trusts and secret real estate empires by accident. It takes lawyers, bankers, silent partners. And yet, Reiner, a man who lived publicly, loudly, politically, kept this entire world hidden. Who else knew? That's what the FBI is still trying to uncover. But according to one leaked report, there was another name on one of the Cayman Island accounts. M. Pfeffer. That's Michelle Reiner's maiden name. A marriage of secrets. Now we enter even murkier waters. Because for decades, Rob and Michelle were seen as inseparable. The couple met in 1988, married the following year, and had 2 children together. In Hollywood terms, that's practically a lifetime. But sources close to the family tell a different story. That behind closed doors, the Reiners had been leading separate lives for years. He was in LA, she was flying off to Europe all the time, one friend claimed. She wasn't just traveling. She was managing something. Something he didn't want to be connected to directly. And that theory aligns with what investigators found. Many of the shell companies tied to the overseas properties, they weren't in Rob's name. They were in hers. But if they were both in on it, why were they killed together? A failing family empire. Let's rewind a bit. Nick Reiner, the troubled son. He's always been a source of friction in the family. Struggles with addiction, conflicts with Rob, failed career ventures. According to LAPD reports, Nick had been living in the guest house for nearly 11 months prior to the murders. Not paying rent, not working, just there. And while publicly Rob tried to support him, privately, things were breaking down. Friends recall explosive arguments. Even a temporary restraining order filed, then mysteriously dropped in late 2022. And here's the kicker. Nick had access to the office. He had the code to the safe. He knew about the Cayman Island transfers. So the theory seems simple, right? Nick kills his parents in a fit of rage or desperation. But if that were the case, why leave behind the one thing that could explain it all? Because when the FBI found that safe, it wasn't empty. It was wide open and full, which suggests one of 2 things. Nick didn't open the safe at all, or someone wanted the FBI to find it. The FBI moves in. Why did the feds get involved so quickly? That's not normal for a double homicide. Usually, it stays local, LAPD jurisdiction. But within 36 hours, federal agents were on site. Why? Because the safe contained evidence of international financial crimes, money laundering, tax evasion, illegal property acquisitions. And at the center of all of it, one man's name kept appearing. R. Reiner. Emails, bank instructions, notarized documents. But then something strange happened. A week after the murders, the FBI issued a secrecy gag order to all involved financial institutions. That means banks were legally barred from commenting on what was found. That's big. That doesn't happen for minor investigations. So, what's the government really looking for? Or better yet, who else was involved? The friend who flipped. In early January, a close family friend, name still sealed by the courts, agreed to cooperate with authorities. They turned over emails between Rob and an unnamed Hollywood producer discussing contingency assets. And the email included one cryptic phrase. If Nick talks, we're screwed. Send it through Michelle's door. That's not random. That's conspiracy. And if you read between the lines, that's fear. Which brings us back to the envelope. The one labeled Romy. If Rob knew something was coming, if Michelle was helping move assets, if Nick was threatening exposure, then this wasn't a random family tragedy. This was a cover-up gone wrong. Or worse, a deal that fell apart. And Romy? She's the wild card. The daughter who found the bodies. The one who warned police about a dangerous family member. But leaked audio from the night of the murder shows something strange. A gap. 12 minutes of silence between the moment she allegedly found the bodies and the moment she called 911. What happened in those 12 minutes? Was she in shock? Was she hiding something? Or was she making a decision? Hollywood's final curtain. This isn't just a murder mystery. This is a dissection of a dynasty. A story about how fame, money, and fear can rot even the most legendary names from the inside out. Because Rob Reiner wasn't just running from legal trouble. He was running from people who knew too much. And those people might be sitting in Hollywood boardrooms, might be sipping wine at award shows, might even be watching this video right now. So buckle in. Because in Chapter 1, we go back to the last 24 hours of Rob Reiner's life. What he did, who he spoke to, and what one missing phone call could reveal. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What do you do when you know the walls are closing in? Do you run? Do you confess? Or do you sit in silence and wait for the storm to hit? That's the question at the heart of Rob Reiner's final day on Earth. Because now, with the benefit of surveillance footage, cell phone pings, eyewitness testimony, and a chilling timeline reconstructed by federal investigators, we can trace nearly every hour of what happened in the Brentwood mansion before the scream started. But even with all of that, one haunting mystery remains. Why didn't Rob leave when he had the chance? December 14th, 8:12 a.m. Security footage from a neighbor's camera shows Rob walking to his mailbox. He's wearing a gray hoodie, head down, alone, mail in one hand, cell phone in the other. For most people, this is just a mundane start to the day. But this isn't a normal day. Because that morning, Rob received a manila envelope, delivered by hand. No return address. He opens it on the porch, stops, stares at the contents for 5 full seconds, then bolts back into the house. According to internal audio surveillance later pulled from the home's Nest system, he made a call within 90 seconds. His voice shaking. "I just got it," he says. "What do I do now?" The call was to an untraceable number. Burner phone. Never registered. But that sentence, that was enough to set investigators down a terrifying path. 10:27 a.m., Michelle's entry. Michelle Reiner, 70, arrives back at the house after a morning meeting with her art dealer in Beverly Hills. She walks in through the garage. Detectives later note something strange in the security logs. The garage motion sensor was disabled between 10 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. This wasn't a glitch. It was manually overridden, meaning someone inside the house didn't want Michelle's entrance tracked. But who? Nick was reportedly asleep in the guest house. Romy was at her apartment. That left one other person, Rob. Why would Rob disable the cameras when his wife came home? Was he hiding something? Or was he protecting her? 11:02 a.m., heated words. Internal microphones pick up muffled voices from the kitchen. Reconstructed audio reveals what investigators believe was a verbal argument. Rob's voice, panicked, rising. Michelle's, calm, deliberate. Snippets of the exchange. "You promised this would be handled. We've come too far, Rob. You can't back out now. This will destroy everything. The kids, they'll survive. But we won't if you keep hesitating." There's a pause. Then a third sound. A knock at the front door. Who came to the house that morning? That part is still unclear. But after that knock, the conversation ends. The voices go quiet. 1:45 p.m., the encrypted drive. This part gets technical, but stay with me. A local internet service provider provided metadata logs showing that at 1:45 p.m., someone inside the Reiner home uploaded an encrypted zip file to a private server in Zurich. The file was titled omega_drop_final.zip. Its contents? Still classified. But based on its 3.4 gigabyte size and the time of upload, cyberforensics experts believe it was either a multi-document drop of legal evidence or a video file archive of confidential footage. Who uploaded it? Investigators traced it back to Rob's desktop login. But remember, anyone could have used his password. Especially someone close. Especially family. 3:12 p.m., Nick emerges. This is where things start to shift. Nick Reiner is seen leaving the guest house, walking toward the main house. He's carrying a brown leather duffel bag. He doesn't knock. He walks in. 15 minutes later, security footage goes black. All indoor cameras, except one. The back stairwell camera continues rolling for another 26 minutes. And it catches something unexpected. Rob walking down the stairs with a different bag. Smaller. Zipped tight. He heads to the garage, loads it into the trunk of his Range Rover. Then he just stands there, frozen, as if deciding whether to go or stay. 4:06 p.m., the call to Romy. Romy Reiner later told investigators that she received a weird voicemail from her dad around 4 p.m. The audio is now public. Rob's voice is low, quiet, almost resigned. "Hey, sweetheart. If anything ever happens, check the drawer in my desk. Bottom right. I love you." Not exactly your average afternoon check-in. She called him back. No answer. Called again. Nothing. At 4:38 p.m., she texted, "You're scaring me. Is everything okay?" No reply. 5:11 p.m., the last meal. Post-mortem analysis showed both Rob and Michelle had dinner shortly after 5 p.m. Chicken marsala, roasted potatoes, arugula salad, prepared by Rob himself, according to fingerprints on the pans. Dinner plates were later found on the kitchen counter. Uneaten. One of the salads was knocked over. Signs of a struggle? Possibly. Or maybe something far more chilling. A confrontation during the meal. 6:20 p.m., the doorbell rings again. Security camera from across the street captures a black car pulling into the driveway. Unmarked. Tinted windows. California plates. A tall figure gets out. Unknown identity. Walks to the door. Is buzzed in. Stays for exactly 18 minutes. Then leaves. Rob's phone logs show an outgoing call immediately afterward. For seconds. No audio. Experts believe this was a ping, a short signal, to alert someone that a delivery had been made. But what was delivered? And to whom? 7:55 p.m., the power glitch. At this moment, something eerie happens. The house's smart system logs a manual override. The alarm is disabled. All interior lights turn off. Outdoor motion sensors are deactivated. And then, one by one, cameras go dark. Except for one, the garage feed. That's the feed where you see Nick Reiner walking past the car, carrying a crowbar and wearing gloves. But here's the part no one can explain. Nick doesn't go into the main house. He disappears into the trees and then reemerges 23 minutes later, empty-handed. So what happened in those missing minutes? Did he bury something, plant something, or meet someone? 9:13 p.m., screams and silence. A neighbor later told police they heard a woman screaming inside the Reiner house. Twice. Then silence. Then a thud. By 9:20 p.m., the lights flicker back on. But no one inside the house moves again. Motion sensors confirm it. No footsteps. No hallway activity. Nothing. Just complete, eerie stillness. For nearly 2 hours. 11:06 p.m., the 911 call. We've already covered this briefly, but here's what matters now. Romy finds the bodies. Rob and Michelle, covered in blood. Multiple stab wounds. She calls 911, sobbing, frantic, breathless. But according to cell tower data, she had arrived at the house 12 minutes earlier. What happened during that time? Did she check on them first? Try to clean something? Or did she know what she'd find? Because when asked if she saw anyone else on the property, her answer was, no, just the guest house lights on. 11:22 p.m., Nick's arrest. Police knock on the guest house door. Nick answers in a t-shirt and jeans. Calm. Cold. He doesn't ask what happened. Doesn't ask why they're there. Just stands there. And says, "It's done then." He's handcuffed. Read his rights. And before they put him in the squad car, he turns to Romy, looks her dead in the eyes, and says one sentence. "You should have burned the letter." Now what? That's the question burning through every headline, every courtroom whisper, every agent's notebook. Because if Rob knew he was in danger, why stay? Why cook dinner? Why call Romy? Why not run? Or did he? And what about that visitor in the black car? And the encrypted upload to Zurich? And the mysterious crowbar Nick carried into the woods? There's one truth no one wants to admit. Everyone in that family was hiding something. And in Chapter 2, we'll find out what was said during the 911 call that night. The one that shook first responders to the core and led police to suspect there was more than just murder at play. But what Romy whispered under her breath before the dispatcher hung up would change everything. How do you explain fear when it's in your voice, but not your words? That's the paradox that gripped detectives the moment they listened to the 911 call that came from Rob Reiner's Brentwood estate on the night of December 14th. The call that reported one of the most shocking celebrity crime scenes of the decade wasn't just a plea for help. It was a code, a fracture, a whisper of betrayal, and it came from Romy Reiner. 11:06 p.m., the call begins. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice is calm, rehearsed. It's a line they say dozens of times a night. But the reply was not routine. It's my parents. I think they're dead. Sobbing. Shallow breaths. A clear female voice, later confirmed as Romy Reiner, 27. I just walked in. There's blood everywhere. The dispatcher asks for her location. She confirms. Brentwood, for 42 Loma Vista. That's the $13.5 million mansion owned by Rob and Michelle Reiner. The dispatcher then asks the next standard question. Are you in immediate danger? And that's when something unusual happens. There's silence. A pause. 5 seconds long. Then, in a whisper, barely picked up on the audio. He said he'd do it if they opened the file. The dispatcher's dilemma. What does that even mean? At first, the dispatcher assumed Romy was talking to someone else, maybe on another line. Or maybe she was in shock. But the words were distinct. Not screamed. Not panicked. Just cold. Measured. He said he'd do it if they opened the file. Those 10 words would later become the cornerstone of the case against Nick Reiner. But at the time, they were missed. Buried beneath sobs and static. The rest of the call, 11:07 to 11:10 p.m. For 3 full minutes, Romy walks the dispatcher through the scene. They're in the living room. There's broken glass on the floor. I think my mom's still holding something in her hand. When asked if anyone else was in the house, Romy answers, no, but the guest house lights are on. Again, her voice is calm. Too calm. And that's what struck LAPD Officer Sal Martinez, one of the first responders that night. He later testified. Something was off. Not that she wasn't grieving, but she sounded like someone already past the shock. Like someone who'd seen it coming. Dispatch log, hidden line item. Now here's where things get even more bizarre. Every 911 call comes with a digital dispatch log. It shows timestamps, GPS location, call duration, and any flagged anomalies. Romy's call was flagged, not once, but twice, by the automated system. The reason? Background interference. Possible second speaker detected. At the 2:13 mark, a second voice, male, is faintly heard saying, "Don't say too much. Just breathe." But no one else was in the room. Or were they? Romy never mentioned another person. The official transcript lists it as inconclusive background noise. But when the FBI enhanced the audio weeks later, it changed everything. The whispered threat. Newly released analysis confirms. The male voice came from approximately 6 to 8 feet behind Romy. It was whispered. It was not Nick Reiner's voice, according to VoicePrint analysts. And it had a distinctive accent, Eastern European, possibly Balkan. That detail, small, overlooked, raised new fears. Because remember those offshore properties? One was in Montenegro. And according to a leaked intelligence memo, a known money courier tied to Balkan property laundering rings was tracked in Los Angeles that same weekend. So now we're asking a bigger question. Was this more than a family murder? Was this a hit? A cover-up? A threat gone wrong? Or a plan, executed perfectly? Romy's behavior after the call. Once the call ended, Romy waited outside for first responders. She sat on the steps. Didn't scream. Didn't run. Neighbors who saw her described her as staring, almost dissociated, like she wasn't really there. When Officer Martinez approached, his body cam footage recorded the exchange. He asked, "Do you know who might have done this?" And without missing a beat, Romy replied, "If it's who I think it is, he's still in the guest house." Now, that sounds like she's accusing Nick. But listen carefully. She didn't say Nick's name. She didn't say, "my brother." She said, "If it's who I think it is." That ambiguity? That distance. Intentional. Almost rehearsed. The second call no one noticed. At 11:31 p.m., 25 minutes after calling 911, Romy made a second call. Not to friends. Not to extended family. But to a disconnected European number. Duration, 43 seconds. What was said? We don't know. But here's what makes it suspicious. The number was registered to a now-defunct Montenegro-based investment firm. The same firm tied to the ownership documents of the beach property linked to Rob Reiner. Coincidence? Or cleanup? Nick's response to the call. Back in the guest house, Nick Reiner was reportedly unaware of the 911 call. Or at least, that's what he told officers. But here's the contradiction. At 11:12 p.m., 6 minutes after the call began, Nick sent a text message. It read, "I guess we're not pretending anymore." It was sent to an encrypted Signal account, user unknown. The message disappeared within 10 seconds. But the metadata proves it happened after Romy placed her call. So did Nick hear the sirens? Did he see the flashing lights? Or did he already know the plan had shifted? Investigators reconstruct the timeline. The FBI later reconstructed this sequence. 10:58 p.m., Romy's phone pings near the west entry gate. She enters the house. 11 p.m., Motion sensors trigger inside the living room. 11:06 p.m. She calls 911. 11:12 p.m. Nick sends encrypted text. 11:14 p.m. Guest house lights turn off. 11:31 p.m. Romy places second international call. 11:37 p.m. LAPD enters property. Everything happened within a 39-minute window. But the biggest mystery? No one saw anyone else leave. If there was a third person, the voice in the background, they vanished without a trace. Was Romy a victim or a witness? Public sympathy initially poured in for Romy. She found her parents. She called for help. She was the face of grief. But once the FBI began digging into the offshore records, her name surfaced. Twice. As a beneficiary of a trust based in Liechtenstein. And as the alternate point of contact for a Zurich-based property escrow firm. She claimed she didn't know about these listings. That her parents must have used her name without her consent. But investigators weren't so sure. One document, signed electronically using her verified Gmail account, approved the sale of a Montenegrin villa on December 8th, 6 days before the murders. So what was really going on? Was Romy caught in the middle of a laundering scheme? Or was she part of the escape plan? The dispatcher speaks. Weeks later, the 911 dispatcher, anonymously, gave a chilling interview. She said, "I've taken thousands of calls. You know when someone is hysterical, when they're in danger. This one, it was different. Like, she wasn't afraid of what happened. She was afraid of what came next." That line stuck with us, because that's exactly what the rest of this story becomes. Not just a tragedy, but a prophecy. Someone in that house knew this was coming. The question is, who? And more importantly, why didn't they stop it? Coming up in Chapter 3, we dive deep into the mind, motives, and history of Nick Reiner, the son who once wrote a film about addiction and redemption, now accused of murdering his parents in cold blood. But Nick's arrest may not be as open and shut as it seems, because when we pull back the curtain on his relationship with Rob, we uncover a father's broken promises, a son's buried resentment, and a trail of withheld money that just might reveal who had the most to lose and who had everything to gain. But what Nick told his attorney in the interrogation room, before asking for a pen and pad, would flip the entire case on its head. What if the person everyone blamed first was the easiest answer? What if the son standing alone in the guest house that night wasn't the monster headlines made him out to be, but the last loose end in a much larger knot? Because before Nick Reiner became a mugshot, a suspect, a hashtag, he was something else entirely. A son who never escaped his father's shadow. A man whose failures were public, whose pain was private. And a convenient villain when everything went wrong. So before we decide who Nick Reiner is today, we have to understand who he was long before December 14th. And trust me, this story doesn't start with murder. It starts with silence. Nick Reiner grew up in a house where stories mattered more than feelings. Rob Reiner wasn't just a father. He was an institution, a presence, a legend who could command a room with a single sentence. The kind of man people listened to, admired, deferred to. Nick, he was the kid in the background. Friends from Nick's childhood describe him as creative but withdrawn, smart, observant, quick with irony, but always cautious, like someone who learned early that saying the wrong thing could cost him attention he'd never get back. At dinner parties, Rob told stories. Michelle charmed guests with art and politics. Romy made people laugh. Nick listened, and when he spoke, he was interrupted. That dynamic matters more than you think, because resentment doesn't always show up as rage. Sometimes it shows up as withdrawal. The early cracks. Nick tried to follow in his father's footsteps. Film school, screenwriting, short projects that almost got picked up. Almost. But almost is a brutal word in Hollywood. And every rejection hit harder because of his last name. People expected genius. They expected magic. They expected Rob Reiner's son to be Rob Reiner. Nick wasn't. He was different. Slower. More internal. More self-critical. By his mid-20s, friends say the pressure turned into something darker. Alcohol first, then pills, then long stretches of disappearing. Rob tried to help, at least publicly. Rehab stints, financial support, industry connections. But privately, that help came with conditions. One family friend later told investigators, Rob didn't trust Nick. He loved him, but he didn't trust him. And Nick felt that every day. Trust, or the lack of it, Keep that word in mind. The money problem no one wanted to admit. By 2021, Nick's finances were in free fall. No steady work, mounting debts, a failed production deal that left him owing six figures. And this is where the story takes a sharp turn. Because according to internal bank records subpoenaed by the FBI, Nick had requested access to a family trust that same year. He was denied. Not postponed. Not reduced. Denied. The decision came from Rob, with Michelle's approval. The reason? Concerns about stability. That phrase appeared in multiple family emails. To Nick, it sounded like judgment. To Rob, it sounded like protection. But to the law, it sounded like motive. The confrontation everyone ignored. In August 2023, 4 months before the murders, neighbors reported a loud argument at the Brentwood estate. Yelling, shouting. A door slammed so hard it triggered a nearby car alarm. Police were not called. No report filed. But texts recovered later tell the story. Nick, texting a friend that night. They think I don't know. They think I'm stupid. Another message, minutes later. If they don't come clean, I might. Come clean about what? At the time, no one knew. Now, it reads like a warning. Nick and the secret. Here's the part most headlines skipped. Nick knew about the offshore accounts. Not all of them, but enough. According to encrypted emails found on his laptop, Nick discovered irregular transfers in early 2023 while helping Michelle scan documents. Amounts that didn't add up. Companies with strange names. Countries Nick had never heard his parents mention before. He asked questions. They brushed him off. Then he pressed harder. That's when the tone changed. One email from Rob to Michelle, later recovered. He's asking too much. We need to shut this down before he does something stupid. That line is crucial. Because from that moment on, Nick wasn't just a liability. He was a threat. The guest house exile. Shortly after that discovery, Nick moved into the guest house. Officially, it was to get back on his feet. Unofficially, it was containment. Close enough to monitor. Far enough to control. And according to multiple witnesses, Nick hated it. He felt watched. Managed. Reduced to a problem. One friend recalls Nick saying, "They act like I'm the danger. But I'm not the one hiding millions." December 14th, Nick's day. Now let's talk about Nick's final day before everything exploded. Cell phone data confirms Nick woke up late, around 11:30 a.m. No calls. No texts. At 12:14 p.m., he Googled one phrase. Federal immunity, whistleblower family. That search alone sent chills through investigators. Why would Nick be researching immunity? Unless he believed he had information powerful enough to trade. At 2:02 p.m., he texted Romy. "Did Dad tell you yet?" No response. At 3:09 p.m., he walked toward the main house carrying that brown duffel bag. What was inside? Nick claims it held notebooks, clothes, and personal documents. But forensic analysis found no clothing fibers inside the bag. Only paper residue. Stacks of it. Documents. The moment everything changed. During Nick's interrogation, detectives asked him one simple question. "Why didn't you leave?" Nick's answer was immediate. "Because they asked me not to." Who is they? At first, police assumed he meant his parents. But Nick clarified. Not just them. Then he went silent. Asked for a lawyer. But before the lawyer arrived, Nick did something unexpected. He asked for a pen and paper. And he wrote one sentence. Just one. "They were already dead before you think." That sentence shattered the timeline. Because if Nick was telling the truth, then the story everyone believed, the one about a violent outburst, a sun snapping, falls apart. The evidence that doesn't fit. Here's what doesn't line up. Nick's clothes had no blood spatter consistent with the attack. The crowbar seen on camera? No fingerprints. No DNA. The wounds on Rob and Michelle suggested a single blade, not a blunt object. So why was Nick carrying a crowbar? Investigators now believe it may have been a decoy, a planted image, something meant to look incriminating. But planted by whom? And for what reason? Nick's motive, or lack of one. Yes, Nick had resentment. Yes, he had money problems. But killing his parents would expose the very secrets that could destroy any chance of financial rescue. Unless he wanted them exposed. Unless Nick believed that bringing everything into the open was the only way out. That's not the mindset of a murderer. That's the mindset of a whistleblower. And that possibility terrified everyone involved. The line that changed the case. During a later recorded jailhouse call, Nick said something that never made the news. Speaking to a childhood friend, he whispered, "They think I did it. That's fine, as long as they don't look higher. Higher, not deeper. Higher." Meaning what? Someone above him? Above the family? Someone with power? Influence? Money? So who is Nick Reiner? A killer? Or a pawn? A broken son pushed too far? Or the only one brave, or desperate, enough to threaten the truth? Because as the FBI continued digging, they realized something unsettling. Every time Nick got closer to exposing the offshore web, someone else stepped in. Someone cleaned up. Someone redirected attention back to him. And in the next chapter, we're going to examine the one place Nick could never fully access, the guest house. Because what investigators found buried just beyond it would force them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the murder. And more importantly, who it was really meant to protect. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. If Nick Reiner committed a double homicide, why didn't he run? Why didn't he destroy evidence? Why didn't he do anything? Because when the LAPD entered the guest house on December 14th, just minutes after Romy's frantic 911 call, they expected chaos. A struggle, clues, blood. What they found instead? Silence. A cup of tea still warm. A bedmate. A laptop open to a blank Word document. And Nick Reiner seated calmly on the couch, like he'd been waiting. But the strangest part? There wasn't a single trace of blood anywhere. Not on the floor. Not on the counters. Not in the drains. It was spotless. Too spotless. And that's what sent investigators into a spiral of suspicion. Because when you've got a murder scene 50 feet away soaked in gore, and the alleged killer living in a pristine guest house next door, something doesn't add up. Let's walk through what they found. A hidden camera no one accounted for. The Reiner guest house had a basic security system. Keypad lock, motion sensor lights, door chime. But it also had something else. A hidden nanny cam. Embedded behind a bookshelf, installed years ago when Rob worried about Nick's sobriety relapses. The camera had been long forgotten. Even Nick didn't know it was still active. And it had been recording for 6 straight days before the murder. FBI analysts recovered the drive. And what they saw? Contradicted everything. December 14th, 7:41 p.m., Nick's panic. The footage shows Nick pacing. For hours. He's talking to himself, clutching what appears to be a crumpled letter in his hand. He sets it down, picks it back up, reads it again, slams it against the wall. No sound, but body language doesn't lie. He's distraught, angry, worried. Then he picks up his phone, starts to dial, stops, then walks outside, toward the woods behind the property. At this point, remember, this is roughly 20 minutes before the murders. The crowbar. In the surveillance footage from the neighbor's garage camera, Nick is seen walking with a crowbar toward the back of the property. Naturally, this was flagged as ominous. But the nanny cam reveals more. Nick returns from the woods 26 minutes later. No crowbar in hand. But this time, he's got a small, charred envelope. Half-burned. Still smoldering. He grabs kitchen tongs. Drops it into the sink. Runs water. Then he pulls out a thumb drive. The USB drive, the one the police nearly missed. The drive didn't show up in initial sweeps. But 2 days later, during a second forensic search, FBI agents noticed the guest house sink trap had been tampered with. Inside the drain, a black USB drive wrapped in plastic. Encrypted, water damaged, but still functional. It took 6 days to crack. And when they did, what they found sent shockwaves through federal offices. Folder, Omega_backup. Sound familiar? It should, because a similar drive, marked Omega_final, had been uploaded to Zurich from Rob's desktop just hours before his death. This backup was slightly older, but contained most of the same files. Property deeds, bank transfers, legal memos written in Rob's voice, a spreadsheet titled Insurance Contingency Beneficiaries, 2024, and in the corner, a tab labeled Romy's share, hold until legal. This wasn't just a backup drive. It was a breadcrumb trail, and Nick had it. So now the theory shifted. Was Nick planning to leak everything? To go public? Was he the whistleblower Rob mentioned in his cryptic letter? And if so, why didn't he do it? The phone call that changed his mind. Inside Nick's call history, a single call stands out. 6:48 p.m. Incoming. Blocked number. Duration, 2 minutes, 41 seconds. After that call, Nick stops pacing. He sits, still, shaking, And then he burns the envelope. What was said in that call? We don't know. But Nick's behavior changed completely afterward, as if a threat had been made. Or worse. A deal struck. The bedroom notebooks. Nick's guest house bedroom had a stack of leather-bound notebooks. Investigators initially skimmed them. Song lyrics, story drafts, therapy reflections. But hidden inside one of them, near the back, a torn-out page, with 4 words. If I disappear, Romy. That line exploded theories. Because remember, Romy claimed Nick was unstable, dangerous, violent. But here's Nick, seemingly fearing for his own safety. So who's lying? And who was playing both sides? A curious visit, caught on trail cam. Now here's where things get even weirder. Just 48 hours before the murder, a trail cam mounted deep in the wooded area behind the guest house snapped a photo at 2:11 a.m. A man, tall, thin, wearing gloves. Not Nick. Not Rob. Not anyone in the family. He's carrying a small box, and he leaves it beneath a tree stump near the creek. When FBI agents searched the area, the box was gone, but the dirt was freshly disturbed. This matches Nick's odd 26-minute trip to the woods with the crowbar. So did he dig it up? Bury it deeper? And more importantly, what was in it? Romy's hidden visit. It gets darker. On December 12th, 2 nights before the murder, Nick's guest house camera caught Romy entering quietly at 1:08 a.m. She's not carrying anything, but her expression? Cold. Emotionless. She walks straight to Nick's desk. Leaves something. Leaves. That something turned out to be a sealed envelope later found in the trash. Inside, a printout. A screenshot of an email from Michelle to someone in Zurich. Subject line. Change in disbursement structure. Remove Nicholas. That was the moment Nick snapped. He wasn't just being cut off. He was being erased. From the accounts. From the family structure. From the future. And his sister? Delivered the message. The guest house timeline. Reconstructed. Let's recap Nick's movements the night of the murder, based on security footage, smart home logs, and forensic timestamps. 6:48 p.m. Receives blocked call. 7 p.m. Begins pacing. 7:41 p.m. Walks toward the woods with crowbar. 8:05 p.m. Returns with burned envelope. 8:20 p.m. Pulls USB from ashes. 8:27 p.m. Hides USB in sink. 9:13 p.m. Murder occurs, based on neighbor report. 9:35 p.m. to 11 p.m. Sits on couch. Doesn't move. 11:22 p.m. Arrested. Says, it's done then. At no point does he leave the guest house between 9 p.m. and his arrest. So unless he committed the murders, cleaned up flawlessly, then staged his own serenity, the question becomes, was someone else in that house? And was Nick waiting for them to leave? What the FBI believes now. Sources close to the investigation now believe. Nick discovered the offshore operation months ago. He tried to use it as leverage. He was silenced internally, cut off financially. He may have made threats to leak it, but someone got there first, and that someone may not be in the Reiner family at all, because a second partial fingerprint was found on the safe in Rob's office, and it doesn't match Nick. Coming up in Chapter 5, we open the drive. The USB marked omega_final.zip, the one Rob himself uploaded to Zurich hours before he died, is cracked by forensic analysts. And inside it, a file that doesn't belong. Not a document, not a deed, but a video. One that shows a secret meeting. One that reveals what Michelle had been hiding from both of her children. And one that proves, without question, that this wasn't just a family betrayal. It was a long con, and someone was trying to walk away clean. But the final frame of that video would reveal a face no one expected. What would you do if your last move on Earth was to hit send? No goodbyes. No press conference. Just one encrypted file, quietly uploaded to a server in Zurich at 1:45 p.m. That's what Rob Reiner did on the day he died. He knew someone was coming. He knew something was unraveling. And he knew that the only way to protect the truth was to let it live somewhere he no longer could. That drive, marked omega_final.zip, was found by the FBI buried deep in a private Swiss server, hidden behind 3 layers of corporate obfuscation and a VPN trail that led nowhere. It was only discovered after an offshore asset flag triggered Interpol's Financial Crime Unit to tip off U.S. agents. Inside it, dozens of PDF documents, legal contracts, banking credentials, account transfers. But at the bottom of the folder structure was one file that didn't fit. Video_final.mov. And what that video showed blew this case wide open. The video begins December 3rd, 2024. The file is exactly 14 minutes and 12 seconds long, shot on a stationary phone camera. The footage is angled upward, clearly propped on a desk. Rob Reiner is sitting alone in a study, not his office, a different room. Notably, the window behind him reveals fog-covered mountains. That matches only one of his known properties, the villa in Montenegro. This is the first proof Rob had visited it in the final month of his life. Something even his children didn't know. Rob's monologue. He begins slowly, like a man who hasn't spoken freely in a very long time. If you're seeing this, then something has gone wrong. Or maybe everything's gone exactly as they planned. His eyes flick between the lens and a stack of documents beside him. I didn't want this. I never wanted any of this. The properties, the accounts, they weren't for escape. They were for insurance. Because the people we were working with, they don't forgive. And they definitely don't forget. He doesn't name anyone. Not yet. But then he drops this line. Michelle and I made a deal. We said we'd protect the kids at all costs. But she broke the agreement. She cut Nick out. She panicked. And now it's too late. A pause. He wipes his face, breathes, and looks directly into the camera. Romy, if this reaches you, you need to know something. Your mother didn't tell you everything. And I think she knew this was coming. She was trying to fix it in her own way. But it won't work. The deal with the Ghost Corporation. The next 6 minutes of the video are Rob explaining a complex financial deal. He references a shell company registered in Cyprus under the name Pendleton Aegis Ltd., a bank account in Zurich holding $12.7 million, a backdoor legal mechanism that would activate a trust in the event of Rob's death, disbursing funds to 2 foreign entities, both untraceable. But here's the kicker. Those entities are tied to a Hollywood entertainment law firm based in Los Angeles. Rob names a managing partner. He knows. He orchestrated most of this. If anything happens, start there. That name was redacted by the FBI in public documents. But internal leaks confirm it matched the name of an advisor who represented A-list producers involved in some of Hollywood's largest franchise deals. This wasn't just a family scandal. This was a laundering ring, using shell companies, film investments, art auctions, and Rob was trying to walk away from it. Michelle's secret meeting. At minute 11:22, the video cuts abruptly. The scene changes. This part was clearly filmed by someone else. A hidden camera. We see Michelle Reiner sitting at a glass table in a chic Zurich restaurant. She's with 2 men. One of them matches the description of a Balkan financier previously investigated for ties to black market real estate. The other? Still unidentified. There's no audio, but her lips are readable. She says, "It's done." He won't say anything. Nick is unstable. We'll handle him. That line, "we'll handle him," became the trigger. Because the FBI had not previously connected Michelle to any direct meetings abroad. This footage proved she wasn't just aware of the laundering. She was actively managing it, and possibly eliminating threats. The final frame. At the end of the video, the footage fades to black. Then a single phrase appears in white text. Trust is broken. Watch who's silent. No music. No signature. Just silence. But in the metadata of the file, an embedded tag. Forwarded. R.Reiner. R.Reiner. Alt account. Timestamp 12:31 p.m. December 14th. 2 hours before the murder. Rob sent this video to his second account. A backup. One the FBI hasn't cracked yet. So the question is, who else has it? And if that footage went public, who would it take down? The reaction inside the bureau. According to internal sources, the moment agents watched this video, the case changed classification. No longer just a domestic homicide. Now potentially a conspiracy tied to international fraud and witness intimidation. That's when federal agents began reviewing the Reiner family's phone logs, email backups, and asset portfolios going back 10 years. And what they found? Connections to a dozen other inactive companies, to multiple offshore holdings, and to at least 3 other entertainment figures now under sealed investigation. Rob wasn't just planning an escape. He was preparing a reveal. And someone beat him to the endgame. Nick's discovery. Now here's the twist. Remember that USB Nick tried to destroy in his guest house? It had an early version of this video, but it ended at minute 11:22, just before Michelle's meeting, meaning Rob must have updated the file right before uploading it to Zurich. So who filmed Michelle? Who gave Rob that clip? And why did Rob sit on it for 11 days? Was he building leverage? Was he being blackmailed? Or was he scared of what would happen if it got out? The envelope in the wall. During a third search of the main estate, particularly the master bedroom, agents found a sealed envelope wedged behind a mounted bookshelf. Inside, a handwritten note from Rob. It was brief, scrawled in rushed handwriting. If the Omega drive fails, it's in the safe deposit box. Zurich. Under Michelle's name. The FBI is now working with Swiss authorities to access that box. But what's in it? Another copy of the video? More documents? Something more damning? Or something that proves this murder wasn't about family at all? Coming up in Chapter 6, we trace the hidden properties connected to Rob and Michelle Reiner, the ones in Montenegro, Zurich, and the Cayman Islands. But it's not just about the homes. It's about what those homes were used for. Because when investigators accessed one of the Montenegrin villas, they found a basement room that had been converted into something that no one, not even Hollywood, wants to be associated with. And what was written on the wall in red marker would send chills through the FBI's most seasoned agents. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What kind of life requires 4 passports, 7 shell companies, and homes in 3 countries that no one, not even your closest friends, know about? That's what the FBI wanted to know the moment they started piecing together Rob and Michelle Reiner's global real estate web. Because what began as a homicide investigation quickly spiraled into something much bigger. A trail of undisclosed properties, stretching from California to Zurich to the jagged coasts of Montenegro. And these weren't just vacation homes. They were vaults, each one carefully registered under offshore companies. Each one isolated, rarely visited. Each one holding secrets no one was meant to uncover. Until the blood spilled in Brentwood, Cayman Islands, the condo that didn't exist. Let's start with the most obvious location in the world for hiding money, the Cayman Islands. On paper, the Reiners had no connection to the Caymans. No travel records. No property filings. Nothing. But a bank statement found in Rob's safe told a different story. Account: Carn Bay Holdings Ltd. Balance: for $0.3 million USD. Linked address: Unit 803, Coral Bay Residences, Grand Cayman. FBI agents contacted the property office. Their response: that unit doesn't exist. But it did. Sort of. Coral Bay Residences had an 803B, an unlisted subunit registered to the building's holding company. A unit no one could rent, view, or purchase. It was used exclusively by corporate partners. And when agents finally got access, they found a single locked room with no furniture. Just a metal cabinet, bolted to the floor. Inside the cabinet, for burner phones, stacks of withdrawal receipts, and a laminated folder labeled Contingency Route B. Zurich, the frozen account. Next came Zurich. The folder marked Omega Backup included a 19-digit account number with Credit Suisse. The Swiss confirmed its existence. Balance: $7.1 million. Ownership: Pfeffer Trust AG, Michelle's maiden name. The address linked to the account was a small 2-bedroom flat just outside Zurich, registered under Thalassa Group SA. Another ghost corporation. But what investigators found inside the Zurich flat wasn't money. It was surveillance. Cameras. Hard drives. Tracking logs. They had timestamps tracking Romy, Nick, and Rob across 6 different countries over 5 years. Someone was watching. And someone, possibly Michelle, was keeping records in case anyone turned on her. But the real horror? That came in Montenegro. Montenegro, the villa on the hill. This is the one that shocked even hardened agents. The Reiners' Montenegrin villa, officially registered under Delta Crescent Holdings, sat perched on a cliffside near Kohar, a 3-level stone estate. Gated, remote, secluded. Neighbors, few and far between, thought it was a Russian property. They'd only seen one American woman enter it over the last 2 years. When the FBI gained access through international coordination, they expected to find more financial files. What they found instead was a basement. The basement room. Down a narrow staircase, past wine racks and bare stone walls, agents found a steel-reinforced door. Keypad locked. The code, found inside Rob's Zurich safe deposit box, opened it. Behind the door, a soundproofed room, with one small desk, a laptop, a wall of monitors, and something written in red marker on the concrete wall. If he talks, he dies. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The hard drives connected to the monitors contained live feed access to 3 U.S. properties. One of them, the Brentwood guest house. Why was the guest house being watched? Now ask yourself, why would someone monitor their own son? Was it for protection or to control? FBI cyber forensic analysts confirmed that the surveillance system was not set up by Rob. It was installed remotely, routed through offshore servers, and paid for through Delta Crescent Holdings, Michelle's shell company. Meaning, Michelle was watching Nick. Every movement, every visitor, every conversation. From a villa halfway across the world. And one surveillance file caught everyone's attention. The deleted clip. Among the archived videos from the guest house, one was marked Deck_13_discussion. It was recorded the night before the murder, but the file had been manually deleted. Only a low-res thumbnail remained. A single frame showing Rob and Nick seated on the guest house couch. No shouting, no violence, just a serious conversation. Agents are still attempting to recover the full video. But if it captured Rob confessing something, or Nick confronting him, then this could have been the moment everything pivoted. From confrontation, to conspiracy, to silence. So what were these properties really for?